The rain hammered against the cracked concrete of the abandoned warehouse district on Kepler 442b, each drop creating tiny explosions of dust and grime. In the shadows between two massive industrial buildings, something stirred that shouldn't exist according to the Galactic Council's official records. Zara pressed herself deeper into the narrow alley, her scales scraping against the rough metal walls. At barely 3 meters from nose to tail, she was small even by dragon standards, her midnight blue scales dulled by weeks of hiding and malnutrition. Her golden eyes, once bright with curiosity, now held only exhaustion and fear. The voices grew louder as the enforcement patrol approached. Scan readings indicate draconic signatures in Sector 7, came the mechanical voice of a Vorthan officer through his translator device. Command wants this one terminated on sight. Zara's breathing stopped. She'd been running for 2 standard months since the purge order came down from the Galactic Council. Dragons were deemed too dangerous for civilized space after the incident on Proxima Station. Never mind that it was one rogue dragon out of thousands. Never mind that dragons like her had never hurt anyone. The heavy footsteps of the patrol grew closer. Zara could see the blue glow of their energy weapons through the gaps in the metal sheeting. Her young heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to make herself even smaller. Nobody wants me, she whispered to herself, a habit she'd developed during the lonely weeks of hiding. Nobody wants me anywhere. The patrol passed by her hiding spot, their footsteps echoing into the distance. Zara waited another hour before emerging, her stomach cramping from hunger. The biowaste disposal units behind the food processing plants were her only source of nutrition now. It wasn't much, but it kept her alive. As she crept through the industrial maze, searching for anything edible, a new sound caught her attention. It wasn't the harsh mechanical noise of alien technology or the threatening voices of enforcement patrols. It was music. Soft, melodic, and somehow warm despite coming from a speaker system. Following the sound, Zara found herself at the edge of a small compound surrounded by a simple energy fence. Inside, she could see a modest building with lights glowing in the windows. The music was coming from there, along with the gentle hum of machinery that sounded different from everything else on this hostile world. A sign by the gate read Markuschan Independent Engineering Solutions in both Standard Galactic and what looked like an Earth script. Zara had heard of humans during her brief time in the orbital station schools before the purge. They were the newest species to join galactic civilization, known for their stubbornness and their strange habit of bonding with almost any other sentient species. Most of the other races considered them oddly emotional and unpredictable. Her stomach gave another painful twist, and she noticed something that made her freeze. There were metal plates scattered around the yard, some with what looked like food scraps on them. Not biowaste or processed nutrition blocks, but actual food. Fresh vegetables, pieces of cooked meat, and something that smelled like bread. Zara's rational mind told her to stay hidden. Humans might be different, but they were still part of the Galactic Council. They still had to follow the purge order. But her starving body made the decision for her. She crept closer to the fence, looking for any gaps she might squeeze through. The energy barrier was set to a frequency that would repel most creatures but wouldn't seriously harm them. It was designed to keep out scavengers, not to kill. Taking a deep breath, Zara pressed against the barrier. The energy stung her scales and made her teeth ache, but she pushed through. On the other side, she collapsed for a moment, breathing hard. The food smells were stronger here. There were indeed plates scattered around the yard, and they were full of food that looked and smelled better than anything she'd eaten in months. But something felt wrong. This was too easy. Too convenient. As if reading her thoughts, a voice spoke from behind her. You know, most creatures smart enough to get through that fence are also smart enough to realize it's a trap. Zara spun around, her small claws extended and ready to fight. Standing in the doorway of the building was a human male, probably middle-aged by their standards. He had dark hair streaked with gray, kind eyes behind rectangular glasses, and was wearing coveralls stained with machine oil and various chemicals. He wasn't holding a weapon. His hands were empty, raised slightly in a gesture that seemed meant to be calming. "Easy there, little one," Markuschan said, his voice gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you. Though I have to say, I wasn't expecting a dragon. The food was meant for the local scavenger species, but you're welcome to it." Zara backed away, her mind racing. This had to be a trick. Humans followed Galactic Council law just like everyone else. He should be calling enforcement, not offering her food. You're scared, Marcus observed, settling down to sit cross-legged on the ground, making himself smaller and less threatening. Can't blame you for that. Things have been rough for your people lately. My people are dead, Zara whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The council killed them all. Marcus's expression darkened. Not all. The official reports are lies, but I've been tracking the real numbers. Maybe 60% of the dragon population was eliminated. The rest scattered to the far reaches or went into hiding. How do you know that? Because I helped some of them escape. Zara stared at him. That was impossible. Helping dragons was treason against the Galactic Council. Humans couldn't afford to make enemies of the Council, not when they were still so new to galactic politics. Why? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the stormy sky. When I was younger, I lived on Earth during the species integration period. I watched my own government try to suppress and control the first alien refugees who came to our world. I saw what fear and prejudice could do to innocent people. When the Dragon Purge started, I couldn't just stand by and watch it happen again. He gestured to the food scattered around the yard. I'd been leaving food out for weeks, hoping maybe some dragon refugees might find their way here. This world is far enough from the core systems that enforcement patrols are light, and my engineering work gives me a legitimate reason to be here. Zara's stomach chose that moment to make a loud growling noise that echoed off the compound walls. Marcus chuckled softly. When was the last time you ate something that wasn't garbage? 2 months, she admitted. Marcus stood up slowly, moving toward one of the food plates. This isn't garbage. Real vegetables from my hydroponic garden, synthetic protein that actually tastes like meat, and fresh bread from my kitchen printer. It's all safe for dragon physiology. I did my research. He picked up the plate and set it down halfway between them, then backed away. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. But you can't keep living on biowaste and hiding in industrial ruins. You're just a kid, aren't you? Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. At 47 standard years old, she was barely past adolescence for a dragon. She should still be in school, learning about the galaxy and her place in it. Instead, she was a refugee with a death sentence on her head. The smell of the real food was overwhelming. Against her better judgment, she crept forward and began to eat. The flavors exploded across her tongue, real, fresh, wonderful food like she remembered from before the purge. She tried to eat slowly, but her body had other ideas. Within minutes, the plate was empty. Marcus had been watching quietly, and when she finished, he nodded toward the building. There's more inside. And a warm place to sleep, if you want it. No strings attached. No tricks. Just a safe place for someone who needs one. Why would you risk this? Zara asked. If the council finds out you're harboring a dragon. Then, they'll learn something about human stubbornness, Marcus replied with a slight smile. We don't abandon people who need help. It's not in our nature. He turned and walked back toward his building, leaving the door open. The warm light and gentle music spilled out into the stormy night, along with more food smells and the promise of safety. Zara sat in the yard for a long time, rain plastering her scales to her body. Every instinct told her to run, to keep hiding, to trust no one. But she was so tired of being afraid. So tired of being alone. Nobody wants me, she whispered again, but this time the words felt different. Less certain. Finally, as the storm grew stronger and the night grew colder, she made her choice. Step by cautious step, she approached the open door. Marcus was visible inside, working at some kind of computer console, apparently ignoring her presence but leaving her free to make her own decision. She crossed the threshold. The inside of the building was warm and dry, filled with the humming of well-maintained machinery and the soft music she'd heard from outside. There were workbenches covered with engineering projects, shelves lined with books and technical manuals, and, in one corner, a small kitchen area where more food smells were coming from. There's a spare room in the back, Marcus said without looking up from his work. Heated, with a comfortable sleeping platform sized for someone about your dimensions. Bathrooms through the second door if you need it. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Zara stood dripping in his entrance area, unable to believe what was happening. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Marcus finally turned around, and she could see genuine kindness in his eyes. Because everyone deserves a home. And because sometimes the best thing you can do is prove that not everyone in the galaxy has lost their decency. For the first time in months, Zara felt something other than fear or hunger. It was a small, fragile feeling, but it was real. Hope. She had found something she thought was lost forever. She had found someone who wanted her around. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus smiled. Welcome home, little dragon. Welcome home. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the small compound, warmth and safety surrounded a young dragon who was no longer alone. For the first time since the purge began, Zara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a future after all. The first night in her new home, Zara slept deeper than she had in months, surrounded by the gentle sounds of human engineering and the knowledge that someone in the galaxy still cared about doing the right thing. Her whispered words had been heard and answered by someone who understood that wanting to belong was the most universal need of all. 3 weeks had passed since Zara first crossed the threshold into Marcus Chen's compound, and she was still waiting for the catch. In her experience, nothing good lasted without some hidden price. But each morning brought the same routine. Marcus would brew his coffee, check his engineering projects, and ask what she wanted for breakfast, as if having a refugee dragon in his workshop was the most natural thing in the galaxy. The hydraulic actuators on the mining platform need recalibration, Marcus muttered to himself as he bent over a complex schematic displayed on his workbench. The tolerances are off by 3 decimal places. Zara watched from her favorite perch on a modified shipping crate, her tail curled around her feet. She'd grown comfortable enough to spend time in the main workshop while Marcus worked, fascinated by the precision and care he put into every project. What happens if the tolerances are wrong? She asked. Marcus looked up, his glasses reflecting the glow from his displays. The miners can't extract resources efficiently. Their productivity drops, which means their families don't get fed properly. Engineering isn't just about making machines work, it's about making lives better. This was what Zara had come to love about Marcus. Everything he did connected back to people, to making things better for someone else. It was so different from what she'd learned about galactic politics and the cold calculations of the council. Can I help? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to help with engineering work? I'm good with numbers, Zara said quickly. Dragons have excellent mathematical minds. Before the purge, I was studying quantum mechanics and spatial geometry. How old are you again? 47 standard years. Marcus shook his head with a smile. Sometimes I forget that your species matures differently. At 47 human years, I was still figuring out which end of a wrench to hold. He gestured to a secondary workstation that had been sitting unused. If you're serious, there's a project that could use a fresh perspective. Nothing dangerous, but it requires precise calculations. Zara practically bounced off her perch, her scales shimmering with excitement. It had been so long since anyone had asked her to use her mind for something constructive. The project turned out to be a water purification system for a remote agricultural colony. The settlers were having trouble with contaminated groundwater, and Marcus was designing a filtration array that could handle their specific mineral composition. The trick is balancing efficiency with sustainability, Marcus explained, pulling up the chemical analysis data. We need to remove the harmful compounds without stripping out the beneficial minerals the crops need. Zara studied the data, her dragon mind automatically sorting through the complex relationships between different chemical concentrations and flow rates. Within an hour, she'd identified 3 optimization points that Marcus had missed. If you adjust the membrane porosity here, and reroute the secondary filtration through this configuration, you can increase efficiency by 12% while reducing power consumption, she said, manipulating the holographic display with her claws. Marcus stared at her calculations for several minutes, running verification protocols. That's brilliant. I've been working on this problem for weeks, and you solved it in an hour. Dragon brains are built for pattern recognition and complex mathematical relationships, Zara explained, trying not to let the pride show too much in her voice. It's why we were valuable to the council as navigators and engineers before. She trailed off, the good mood suddenly dampened by memories of what she'd lost. Marcus seemed to sense her change in mood. The council made a mistake, he said firmly. Fear makes people stupid, and stupid people make terrible decisions. Your species wasn't the first to suffer for it, and, sadly, you probably won't be the last.
Do you really think other dragons survived? I know they did.
Marcus turned to face her fully.
I've been in contact with an underground network that's been helping dragon refugees find safe haven.
Most are hiding on rim worlds or in systems outside Council jurisdiction. Zara felt her heart skip a beat.
There are others?
Scattered, but alive.
Some are living with sympathetic aliens on remote colonies.
A few made it to human space. Earth has officially refused to recognize the Purge Order.
Earth refuses to follow Council law?
Marcus grinned. Humans have this annoying habit of deciding for ourselves what's right and wrong. The Council can posture all they want, but they need our industrial capacity and military support too much to push the issue.
This was news to Zara.
She'd assumed all Council species were united in their fear of dragons. The network has been looking for safe houses and waystations, Marcus continued. Places where refugees can rest, get medical care, and figure out their next steps.
I've been thinking about officially joining their efforts. That would mean more dragons coming here?
If you're comfortable with that.
This is your home now too, Zara.
I won't make decisions that affect your safety without talking to you first. The concept of having a say in decisions that affected her was still strange to Zara. For most of her life, dragons had been subject to Council policies they had no voice in creating. The idea that her opinion mattered was revolutionary. I'd like to help other dragons, she said slowly.
But what if enforcement finds us?
Then, we deal with it when it happens.
But I've got some advantages they don't know about.
Marcus led her to a section of the workshop she'd never seen before, hidden behind what looked like a normal storage panel. Inside was a room filled with advanced computer systems and communication equipment that looked far more sophisticated than anything a simple engineering contractor should have. I wasn't entirely honest about my background, Marcus admitted. I do independent engineering work, but I also do consulting for Earth's intelligence services.
Officially, it's industrial espionage prevention.
Unofficially, I keep track of what the Council is really up to.
Zara stared at the equipment. You're a spy.
I prefer information specialist. And, before you ask, no, I wasn't assigned to find and help dragons.
That's entirely personal initiative. Could you get in trouble for it?
Probably. But, my supervisors have learned to look the other way when I pursue projects they can't officially approve of.
The communication panel chirped softly, indicating an incoming message. Marcus checked the display and nodded.
Speaking of projects, we might have our first refugee incoming. A young dragon named Keth, escaping from the Centauri sector. He's injured and needs a safe place to recover.
Zara felt a mix of excitement and nervousness.
She hadn't seen another dragon since the purge began.
When will he arrive?
3 days.
He's traveling on a cargo freighter with some sympathetic Terran traders. They'll drop him off after dark.
The next 3 days passed quickly as Marcus and Zara prepared for their guest. They set up a second sleeping area, stocked medical supplies, and prepared extra food.
Zara found herself both eager and terrified to meet another survivor.
Keth arrived exactly as planned, carried by 2 human smugglers who treated him with obvious care and respect. He was older than Zara, probably in his 70s, with deep green scales and a long scar across his left wing that explained why he'd needed transport rather than flying himself. "Another dragon," he said when he saw Zara, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and disbelief. "You're safe here," Zara told him, using the formal dragon greeting she hadn't spoken in months. "The human Marcus has given us sanctuary."
Keth looked around the workshop with amazement. "A human helped you?"
"I thought they all followed Council orders."
"This one is different," Zara said. "This one believes in doing what's right instead of what's convenient."
Over the following weeks, as Keth healed and regained his strength, the small compound became something Zara had never expected to experience, a real home with a family. Marcus treated both dragons as equals, involving them in his engineering projects and teaching them about human culture and technology.
In return, the dragons shared their knowledge of galactic science and engineering.
Keth, who had been a senior engineer before the purge, brought expertise in starship propulsion systems that complemented Zara's mathematical abilities. "We make a good team," Marcus observed one evening as they completed the final calculations on a revolutionary new power distribution system.
human intuition, dragon mathematics, and shared determination to make the galaxy a better place. Is this what you humans call a family? Zara asked. Marcus smiled. One kind of family, yes. The kind you choose for yourself instead of being born into.
That night, as Zara settled into her sleeping area, she listened to the gentle sounds of Marcus working late in his shop and Keth practicing the breathing exercises that helped his damaged wing heal. For the first time in her life, she felt truly secure. The compound had become more than a hiding place. It had become proof that the galaxy still contained people willing to risk everything to do the right thing. And, for two young dragons who had lost everything, it had become the home they'd never dared to hope for. Outside, the storms of Kepler 442b continued their eternal dance across the industrial landscape, but, inside the workshop of Marcus Chen, three unlikely friends were building something that the Galactic Council had tried to destroy, hope for a future where fear didn't dictate who deserved to exist. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new refugees to help, but tonight was for rest and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, the most powerful act of rebellion was simply refusing to let cruelty have the final word. The morning alarm on Marcus's workshop console broke the pre-dawn silence with an urgent pattern that made Zara's scales stand on edge. She'd been living in the compound for 2 months now, and she'd learned to recognize the different alert sounds. This one meant trouble. Marcus emerged from his quarters, already pulling on his coveralls and checking his communication devices. Enforcement patrol ships just entered the system, he announced. 3 vessels, heavy scanning equipment. They're not here for a routine inspection. Keth looked up from the propulsion calculations he'd been working on. His wing had healed enough for short flights, but he was still not ready for long-distance escape. Do they know about us? Unknown. But we need to assume the worst. Marcus moved to his hidden control center and began activating systems that Zara had never seen before. Suddenly, the entire compound hummed with new energy as defensive screens and sensor scramblers came online. You have military-grade equipment, Zara observed, watching displays that showed the approaching ships in real time. Earth doesn't send intelligence operatives into hostile territory without proper support, Marcus replied. The question is whether they're here for me, for you, or for something else entirely. The answer came an hour later when the enforcement ships landed at the main spaceport 30 kilometers away. Instead of spreading out to conduct searches, they established a perimeter around a single location, the processing center where refugee applications were handled. They're not looking for us, Keth realized, studying the tactical display. They're intercepting other refugees. Marcus's expression hardened. The network intelligence was right. The Council is trying to shut down the underground railroad completely. They're going after anyone who might help dragons escape. How many refugees are at that processing center? Zara asked, though she dreaded the answer. According to my contacts, at least 12 dragons and their families. Plus the human and alien sympathizers who've been helping them. We have to do something, Zara said immediately. We can't fight enforcement directly, Marcus warned. 3 ships means at least 100 armed officers with military-grade weapons and armor. Then, we don't fight them, Keth said slowly. We outthink them. Marcus turned to stare at the older dragon. What do you have in mind? You said you're an intelligence operative. That means you have access to Council communication networks, correct? Limited access, but, yes. And, Zara is brilliant with mathematical calculations and system analysis. Where are you going with this? Marcus asked. Keth smiled, showing teeth that gleamed in the workshop lighting. We're going to steal their ships. For a moment, the workshop was silent except for the humming of machinery. Then, Marcus began to laugh. You want to steal 3 enforcement patrol ships? Not steal, Keth corrected. Commandeer. Temporarily. Long enough to evacuate the refugees and get them to safety. That's insane, Zara said. It's also brilliant, Marcus admitted. If we can pull it off. The plan that emerged over the next several hours was complex, risky, and required perfect timing. Marcus would use his intelligence access to infiltrate the enforcement communication network and feed them false information about dragon sightings in distant parts of the system. While their attention was diverted, Keth would fly to the spaceport and use his engineering expertise to disable the ship's security systems. Zara would coordinate from the compound, using her mathematical abilities to calculate flight paths and timing that would allow the refugees to escape before enforcement realized what was happening. The biggest risk is the communication hack, Marcus explained as he prepared his equipment.
If they detect the intrusion, they'll know exactly where it's coming from. And Keth will be completely exposed at the spaceport, Zara added. If they catch him.
Then, we'll deal with that when it happens, Keth said firmly.
Those refugees didn't choose to become refugees any more than we did. If we don't help them, who will?
As night fell, they put their plan into action. Marcus's fingers flew over his keyboards as he worked his way through layers of enforcement security protocols. Years of intelligence training had taught him exactly how their systems worked, and he knew their weaknesses.
I'm in, he announced.
Feeding them sensor ghost readings in sectors 12 through 15. That should pull at least 2 of the ships away from the spaceport.
Keth spread his wings, testing their strength.
The damaged one ached, but it would hold for the flight he needed to make. I'll signal when I reach the ships. Zara, be ready with those calculations. Flight path uploaded to your communicator, Zara confirmed. Low altitude approach, following the industrial thermal patterns to mask your heat signature.
As Keth launched into the stormy night, Zara turned her attention to the refugee evacuation calculations.
12 dragons, plus their human and alien helpers, would require 3 separate transport runs. She had to account for ship capacity, fuel consumption, defensive capabilities, and the time needed to reach safe haven. The numbers were daunting. Even with perfect execution, they would be cutting things dangerously close. 2 enforcement ships are responding to the false readings, Marcus reported.
They're moving out of the spaceport area.
1 ship remains on station.
Keth, you have approximately 1 hour before they realize the sensor readings are false, Zara transmitted to the Flying Dragon.
Understood. Beginning approach to the ships.
The next hour was the longest of Zara's life.
She monitored a dozen different data streams, tracking enforcement communications, weather patterns, refugee locations, and Keth's progress through the spaceport security grid. I'm at the first ship, Keth's voice crackled through the communicator. Security systems are more sophisticated than expected, but I think I can work around them. Enforcement is getting suspicious about the sensor readings, Marcus warned.
They're running verification protocols. How long do we have? Zara asked. Maybe 20 minutes before they figure out it's a false alarm. On her displays, Zara watched the complex dance of timing and position. The refugees were gathering at their assigned evacuation points. The remaining enforcement ship was maintaining its position but showed signs of increased scanning activity. Keth was working his way through the ship security systems, but progress was slower than they'd hoped. First ship is ready, Keth announced. Moving to the second. Enforcement verification is 70% complete, Marcus reported. They're going to figure it out soon.
Keth, you need to move faster, Zara urged.
Working as fast as I can. These systems are designed to prevent exactly what I'm doing. The timing was getting tighter by the minute.
Zara ran the calculations again and again, looking for any way to improve their odds.
Finally, she saw a possibility. Marcus, can you trigger the spaceport's emergency evacuation procedures? What are you thinking? If the spaceport goes into emergency lockdown, enforcement will have to respond. It will buy us time and confusion. It will also put a lot of innocent people in danger. Set it for a chemical leak alert in the cargo processing area. Serious enough to require evacuation, but no actual danger to anyone. Marcus considered for a moment, then began typing. You're learning to think like a human, Zara. Sometimes the best solution is the one that looks like a problem. The spaceport emergency alarm began wailing across the industrial complex.
Immediately, Marcus's monitors showed enforcement personnel responding to what appeared to be a hazardous material incident. The remaining ship at the spaceport had to divert crew to assist with evacuation procedures.
Second ship ready, Keth reported. Starting on the third.
Enforcement has figured out the false sensor readings were a hack, Marcus announced.
They're tracking the intrusion back to us. How long? Zara asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Keth, you have to finish now.
Almost there.
These dragons better appreciate what we're doing for them. Trust me, they will. The final minutes were a blur of activity.
Keth completed his work on the third ship just as the first refugees reached the spaceport. Marcus held off the communication trace as long as possible while Zara coordinated the evacuation using the compromised enforcement vessels. All refugees aboard the ships came to report from the evacuation coordinators.
Ready for launch. Enforcement is moving back to the spaceport, Marcus warned. They know something's happening. Launch now, Zara ordered.
All three ships, emergency speed to the hyperspace jump point. On her displays, she watched as 3 stolen enforcement patrol ships rose from the spaceport carrying precious cargo, 12 Dragon families and their human supporters, all fleeing to safety among the stars. They made it to hyperspace, Marcus announced.
Jump successful. They're away. Keth landed in the compound courtyard just as enforcement vehicles surrounded the perimeter.
His wing was bleeding from the strain of extended flight, but he was grinning.
Did they make it?
Clean escape, Zara confirmed.
All refugees safe.
Enforcement is at our gate, Marcus observed calmly.
Time for the next phase of the plan. They'd prepared for this moment.
Marcus activated his official intelligence credentials and prepared to claim that he'd been conducting authorized surveillance of smuggling operations. The stolen ships would be explained as a necessary infiltration of criminal networks. It was thin, but it might work. Whatever happens, Marcus said as they prepared to face the enforcement officers, remember that we saved lives tonight. 12 Dragon families are free because of what we did here.
13 families, Zara corrected. We saved ourselves too.
The enforcement officers who entered the compound found exactly what Marcus wanted them to find: an official intelligence operative, his equipment, and his reports on criminal smuggling activities. They also found 2 dragons who were officially listed as intelligence assets in Marcus's files. It took 3 hours of interrogation, but eventually, the enforcement team accepted Marcus's story. As far as they knew, the ship theft had been carried out by the same criminal network that Marcus was investigating. His presence at the scene was explained by his ongoing surveillance operation. After the enforcement team departed, the 3 friends sat in the workshop, exhausted but triumphant.
So what happens now? Zara asked.
Now we do it again, Marcus said. Word will spread through the network. More refugees will need help.
More families will need safe passage.
And we'll be here to help them, Keth added. Zara looked around the workshop that had become her home, at the humans and dragons who had become her family, and at the equipment that would help them save more lives in the days ahead. Nobody wants me, she whispered, but this time the words carried no sadness.
Instead, they carried determination. Nobody wants us.
But that just means we're free to choose our own path. Outside, the storms of Kepler 442b continued their eternal dance, but inside the workshop, 3 revolutionaries planned their next move in a war against fear and hatred. They'd proven that courage and intelligence could triumph over force and prejudice. And they were just getting started. 6 months after their first rescue operation, Marcus Chen's compound had transformed from a simple engineering workshop into something that defied easy classification. The Galactic Council's files listed it as an independent research facility, Earth Intelligence knew it as Outpost 7, and the Underground Railroad called it Haven Station. To the 43 dragons who had passed through its doors, it was simply home. Zara stood on the newly constructed observation deck, watching the morning sun paint the industrial landscape in shades of gold and amber. Below her, the compound bustled with activity that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived as a starving refugee. The morning briefing is ready, called Vera, a young human engineer who had arrived 3 weeks ago with the latest group of refugees. She'd been working for a council research station when she discovered their secret experiments on captured dragons. Her choice to destroy the research and flee with the test subjects had made her a fugitive, but it had also made her family. In the main workshop, 24 beings gathered around the central holographic display. Dragons of various ages sat alongside humans, a few Altarian engineers who opposed the council's policies, and even a couple of Vorthan defectors who had refused to participate in the purge. Current network status, Marcus began, activating the display that showed a 3-dimensional map of known dragon populations across the galaxy. We've successfully relocated 127 dragons to safe havens in the past month. Earth colonies have accepted 63, the rim worlds have taken 42, and independent systems have provided sanctuary for the rest.
Keth, now serving as the compound's senior flight coordinator, added, transport operations are running smoothly.
Our stolen enforcement ships have been modified enough that they're essentially unrecognizable. The Council still hasn't figured out how their own vessels keep disappearing.
What about the new intelligence from the Proxima sector? Asked Dr. Sarah Kim, a xenobiologist who had joined their cause after witnessing Council research facilities.
Marcus's expression grew serious.
The Council is planning something called Operation Final Solution.
The details are classified, but our sources suggest it's designed to locate and eliminate all remaining dragons in Council space. A murmur of concern rippled through the gathered beings.
Zara felt the familiar chill of fear, but it was tempered now by something stronger, determination. How long do we have? She asked. Unknown.
But we need to accelerate our evacuation efforts. Every dragon still hiding in Council space needs to be moved to safety within the next few months.
That's impossible, protested Keth.
We'd need 10 times our current transport capacity and 100 more safe houses. Then, we build them, Zara said firmly. All eyes turned to her as she stood and moved to the display.
We've proven that the Council's authority isn't absolute. We've shown that fear can be overcome by courage and intelligence.
It's time to stop thinking like refugees and start thinking like revolutionaries. She manipulated the holographic display, highlighting systems throughout the galaxy.
Every one of these locations has sympathetic populations. Humans who remember being refugees themselves. Altarians who value scientific truth over political convenience. Vorthans who believe in justice. We don't need to hide anymore.
We need to build a network so large and so distributed that the Council can't destroy it.
Marcus smiled proudly. What are you proposing? A new kind of civilization.
Not one based on the Council's fear and control, but on cooperation and mutual aid.
We call it the Free Worlds Alliance. The room erupted in discussion as the implications of Zara's proposal sank in.
She was talking about nothing less than creating an alternative to the Galactic Council's authority. The Council has military superiority, warned Commander Torres, a human naval officer who had defected after being ordered to participate in dragon hunts.
They could crush any open rebellion.
Not if the rebellion is everywhere at once, Zara replied. And not if it's built on principles they can't understand or counter. Over the following weeks, the compound became a hive of planning and preparation. The Free Worlds Alliance began as an idea but quickly evolved into a practical reality. Messages were sent to sympathetic systems throughout the galaxy, offering not just refuge for dragons but partnership in building something better. The response was overwhelming.
Entire colonies declared their independence from Council authority and requested admission to the Alliance.
Starships began arriving daily, bringing not just refugees but volunteers, supplies, and technical expertise. We're going to need a bigger workshop, Marcus observed as he watched another transport ship land in their expanded facility. We're going to need a bigger planet, Keth laughed, directing the new arrivals to processing stations that handled immigration, job placement, and housing assignments. Zara found herself appointed as the Alliance's first director of integration, responsible for helping displaced beings find their place in the growing community. It was work she loved, but it also brought unexpected challenges. I don't understand why we should trust them, growled Thane, an older dragon who had survived the initial purge by hiding in asteroid mining colonies.
Humans have been part of the Council.
They followed the same laws that tried to destroy us.
Some humans followed those laws, Zara replied patiently. Others chose to risk everything to save us. The same is true of every species.
We can judge individuals by their choices, not their genetics.
And what about when the Council comes for us? What happens to your human friends when they have to choose between protecting us and protecting their own people?
It was a fair question, and one that Zara had wrestled with herself. But she'd found her answer in the 6 months of watching Marcus and the other human volunteers work tirelessly to save dragon lives.
They've already made their choice, she said. They chose to believe that doing the right thing matters more than following orders. That's why we can trust them.
The real test of that trust came 3 months later when Council battle fleets appeared at the edge of 17 different Alliance systems simultaneously. Operation Final Solution had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn whether the Free Worlds Alliance was strong enough to survive its first real challenge.
Council fleets are demanding surrender of all dragon populations, reported the communication officer. They're giving us 6 standard hours to comply. Response?
Marcus asked, looking around the emergency council that had assembled.
We fight, Zara said without hesitation.
Not with weapons, but with everything we've built here.
We show the galaxy that there's an alternative to fear.
The battle that followed wasn't fought with energy weapons or missile barrages. Instead, it was a battle of information, communication, and moral authority. As Council fleets moved to attack Alliance worlds, something unprecedented happened. Citizens of Council systems began to rebel. The images of dragon families being protected by human and alien volunteers spread across galactic communication networks. Stories of the Underground Railroad, of scientists destroying their own research rather than harm innocent beings, of military officers choosing court-martial over participation in genocide, reached every corner of civilized space. The Council's support is crumbling, reported Dr. Kim, monitoring news feeds from across the galaxy.
Protests on a dozen core worlds. 3 member species have withdrawn from the Council entirely. The Altarian Science Directorate has officially recognized the Free Worlds Alliance as a legitimate government, added Commander Torres. So have the Human Colonial Administration and the Vorthan Ethics Council.
What had begun as a rescue mission for dragon refugees had grown into a fundamental challenge to the political order of the galaxy. The Free Worlds Alliance represented something that had never existed before, a government based on voluntary association and mutual aid rather than fear and dominance.
Council fleets are withdrawing, announced the tactical officer. All 17 battle groups are returning to Council space.
The celebration that erupted across the compound and throughout Alliance space was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. For the first time since the Purge began, dragons could fly freely under open skies without fear of execution. Later that evening, as the celebration continued in the workshop below, Zara stood on her observation deck watching the stars. Marcus joined her, carrying 2 cups of the tea he'd taught her to appreciate.
Any regrets? He asked.
About what? About that first night when you chose to trust a stranger who offered you food and shelter.
Zara considered the question seriously. Do you know what I regret most?
What's that? That it took me so long to stop whispering that nobody wanted me.
And, now?
Zara smiled, gesturing toward the compound where dozens of different species worked together, learned together, and built a future together.
Now I know that the most important thing isn't whether people want you. It's whether you're willing to want them back. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That might be the most human thing I've ever heard a dragon say. Or the most dragon thing you've ever heard a human say.
They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships arrive and depart, carrying supplies, messages, and hope to every corner of Alliance space. The Free Worlds Alliance had grown far beyond anything they'd imagined when they first started helping dragon refugees. It had become proof that beings could choose cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and love over hatred.
What happens next? Zara asked. Next, we keep building. We keep proving that there's a better way to live among the stars. We keep showing the galaxy that nobody has to be unwanted as long as there are people willing to create homes for each other.
Below them, the compound hummed with activity as engineers from a dozen species worked together on projects that would benefit worlds they'd never seen. In the communication center, operators coordinated relief efforts for refugees from conflicts the Council had created.
In the workshop, teachers from Earth worked alongside dragon scholars to develop new educational programs for Alliance children.
It was chaos and order, alien and familiar, challenging and comforting all at the same time.
It was exactly what home should be. Zara had once been a young dragon who whispered that nobody wanted her. Now she was a leader in the most important political movement the galaxy had ever seen.
She had learned that being unwanted by those who rule through fear was actually a qualification for building something better. As the twin moons of Kepler 442b rose over the horizon, casting silver light across the bustling compound, Zara realized that she had found something more valuable than acceptance from the powerful. She had found the power to create acceptance for others. The little dragon who had once hidden in industrial ruins now stood at the center of a movement that would reshape the galaxy. And it had all started with a single human engineer who understood that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to let anyone remain unwanted. The stars wheeled overhead, carrying ships full of refugees toward new homes, families toward new futures, and hope toward every corner of the galaxy where beings dreamed of something better than fear. Nobody had wanted the dragon refugees, but they had wanted each other. And that, as it turned out, was enough to change everything.